Welcome back to the Prevention Leaders Podcast. Today, we're diving into a conversation that's going to resonate with anyone who cares about creating thriving, healthy communities. Our guest is Stephanie Patton, a coalition coordinator, prevention leader, and someone who lives and breathes the science of the positive framework. She's been doing this work for years in her community just south of Boston, managing prevention departments, overseeing multiple grants, and helping coalitions turn their good intentions into real lasting impact. And speaking of impact, if you're looking for a simple way to bring more happiness, joy, and reflection into your own life, check out my new Joy Journal. It's a 90-day guided journal that helps you start and end your day with intention. In just about 2 minutes a day, you'll notice the bright moments that are already there, even on the hard days. You can grab your copy on Amazon, and I'll drop the link in the show notes. And that ties in perfectly to today's conversation, because what I love about Steph is how she connects the dots between data and relationships, between strategy and culture, and between big picture frameworks and the everyday reality of running meetings, building trust, and growing the positive. In this episode, we're talking about why frameworks matter, how to make them come alive in your coalition work, and why the most overlooked tools, like a simple meeting agenda, might just be your most powerful culture builder. So grab your notebook, lean in, and get ready, because this conversation is full of practical wisdom and heart for prevention.
Welcome to Prevention Leaders Podcast with Dave Clausen, your source for insights into the world of substance misuse prevention. Each episode, Dave brings you the latest strategies, expert discussions, and real-life success stories designed to empower your work and inspire impactful change. Whether you're a prevention professional, community advocate, or simply passionate about making a difference, this podcast will keep you informed and motivated. Get ready to lead with a confidence that drives lasting results. Let's lead the change together.
All right, folks, we're back again, and today is going to be a fun, positive, and intriguing conversation because the one and only Stephanie Patton is here to talk with us today. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
Yes. Oh, I'm so excited. And it's been fun getting to build a relationship with you through the Montana Institute and their Summer Institute, and looking forward to this year's. And I'm looking forward to next year's as well, even though it's not even done with this year's yet, because it is just one of the highlights of my year every single year.
Yep.
But can we just kick things off with just a little introduction? Can you tell our audience a little bit about yourself and the work that you do?
Sure. Yeah. So as I said, my name is Stephanie Patton. I am in Massachusetts. So I work sort of south of Boston, for halfway between Boston and Providence, for people who don't know the geographic area. And for the last long time, I have worked as a coalition coordinator, primarily in my community. I manage our prevention department, and I oversee a number of grants and some staff. And I have been managing our community coalition around substance abuse prevention and really growing health and wellness in our community with a focus on adolescents and families, which has been fantastic. Prior to that, I actually did a lot of technical assistance for community coalitions in Massachusetts. I worked for an organization that was funded by our Bureau of Substance Addiction Services to do that, which is kind of ultimately how I ended up where I am now. And on the side, I have the privilege of doing some work with the Montana Institute in my free time. So that's a passion project of mine that I love, and I feel honored to have the opportunity to be able to do that. And we've been using the Montana Institute Science of the Positive Framework in our work in my community for years, for a really, really long time. And so on the ground, thinking about positive community norms and how we apply the frameworks and all of those pieces. So that's been really exciting. And I'm a mom and an adolescent. So I am living what does it mean to have an adolescent child in your house, which is giving you perspective every day for my, since that's our focus population. And yeah, other than that, just sort of do our thing.
I mean, got a lot going on there, and so many different aspects. I'd love to kind of zoom in here, zoom in here, zoom in here. But I think if I were to zoom out and look at sort of an overarching question, I kind of would love to talk about frameworks. You worked as a TTA provider. You currently oversee multiple different grants, all that are going to require, implementing programs. Then you've got your coalition. You've supported multiple coalitions. You live and breathe the science of the positive. You know the good old strategic prevention framework. And one of the things that I see a lot with both coalitions and even just prevention organizations, they'll get funding for a specific grant on some specific deliverables, and they'll just, all right, here's what we got to do. Let's go. And they won't have that core framework, that foundation to truly guide their implementation. And so can we talk about how do we even start like integrating and making these frameworks a part of the lifeblood of what we do?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think, so one of the places that I've been really trying to think about that lately actually is with our logic models. And because I think you're right, I think sometimes we get caught up in the language of like the grant and the funder says, construct your logic model, and you're thinking about like the programs and the strategies. And sometimes I think we lose sight of those bigger pieces that are really important to us. So philosophically, for me, the science of the positive framework and the sort of foundational pieces around the positive exists and it's worth growing and thinking about the cycle of transformation. I feel like I need to all the time be thinking about like, how does that show up in things like our logic model? How does it show up in the day work that I do? Sometimes it gets lost, get stressed out, or, things are going on and you have to sort of remind yourself. But I think it's really important. I mean, I think the strategic prevention framework similarly, is also sort of an overarching piece around like, are we being data driven? What are we sort of, starting with what we understand about our community and some of the issues. And so really trying to think about, well, what does this look like if I really am applying these frameworks in my logic model? Is that visible to me? Is it visible to the people we work with? Like I think about them as sort of a through line. Like if stuff doesn't align with that, then maybe it doesn't really belong there.
So you're working with a coalition. You're supporting them.
Yep.
And they've got a couple, like one or two, main funding streams.
Yep.
And they want to integrate the science of the positive framework.
Yep.
Where does it fit? Where does it start?
Yeah.
Does it start with, okay, here's our deliverables and we work backwards to it? Or is it we set these deliverables, these grants aside, and we go through the framework and then we pull in the grants to see where they align? The chicken or the egg?
I know. Yeah, that's hard. Where does it start? Where doesn't it start? Yeah. So I think like as a coalition for years, we've been doing a lot of work really thinking about and building our own capacity around science of the positive. So we were fortunate enough a number of years back to have Dr. Lincolnbach come out and actually do some work directly with the coalition. And some other folks from the Montana Institute team, Sarah Thompson has been out, Jason Anderson has been out, and I consider all of these people also my friends. So I feel really fortunate when, we've had the opportunity to work with them in that level. So that's one piece, is really helping folks think about where does the science of the positive show up for them, both in the coalition work we do, but also in everything that they do. So, you're a school administrator. What does this mean to you in your day-to-day life as a school administrator? Like where do these pieces show up? And, I feel like some of my job is pointing that out to people. Hey, you might call it this, but like, I think of that as like growing the positive, or, you identified a misperception, and so kind of naming those things for people. So I think the capacity building piece is one. We did some work as a coalition to look at our core values, and we used the Montana Institute's framework around the 7 core principles to think about, what are our core values for our coalition and what does that look like here in our community? And so sort of applying and thinking about the work we've done in the past, the work we want to do in the future. How does that align so that we can sort of revisit those? And, I put those on the back of every agenda. So like a visual reminder for ourselves, like, are we checking in? Are they, and then every couple of years, we're like, are these still relevant? Does the language still work for us? Is this still true to who we are? So I think there are those pieces. And then I think for me, like, I feel like part of my job is to vet strategies through that lens too. Like, is this as we're looking at the science behind some of the strategies and we're aligning them with the data and what we know about our community, are they also things that are growing health, or are we, really leaning into that deficit based model? And also like, what is the context for all of the work that's happening? Because sometimes people throw stuff at you, the community is like, we're going to do this crash car, or we want to do this other prevention activity that, it has sort of a ring to it that, you're like, ooh, that could be pretty negative, and then how do we align with our partners and help uplift stuff and think about like, okay, well, is there a way for us to contextualize this and think about what threads can we pull? How are we growing the good? So I try to think about it in kind of all of the places, from like, how do we make sure folks on the coalition are speaking that same language and using the framework, not just in our coalition work, but also outside, because all of those threads come together. And then how are we using that almost as like a guiding light, I guess, with some of the work that we do.
You shared a tip.
Yeah.
That I want to just like extract and highlight for listeners, because it on its surface is a very simple practice, but the impact's just unimaginable. And printing something on the back of every agenda.
Yeah.
Explain that more. You just off the cuff. I just do that.
Yeah.
But that is an important step.
Yeah. I think for me, that's partly just trying to it's a visual reminder to people. Or if people are new to the meeting, then they might, if we forget, they might turn it over and be like, hey, what's this? I'm unfamiliar with this. Can you tell me a little bit more about it? I think sometimes, particularly with frameworks, it's easy for them to become invisible. So even if I'm working to the framework, I feel like part of my work and role as a prevention leader is to highlight that to the folks around me. So to be thinking about, how am I making that visible to the rest of us? Because it's not enough for one person to sort of be carrying this. And so I think, how can we be speaking in the same language? How are we aligning all of the things that we're doing? How are we naming these pieces for people? Like I write all of our coalition agendas using the science of the positive as well. Like I always think about, okay, spirit first, then science, then action, then return. Sometimes I'll label the agendas that way and we'll talk about it. And we, say like, okay, just to be transparent here, we're starting with spirit first and this is why, and it comes from the science of the positive framework. And remember, like, this is the framework we've been working with for a long time. And sometimes, for me, like sometimes it's just with enough practice, it's like a muscle, you do it naturally. And then sometimes you forget to bring people along and they have the experience of being part of that framework, but they don't always know that that's what's happening. And I feel like if we want to continue to grow that, we need to also say that for people.
I think I see a whole training right here on running an effective or leading or facilitating an effective coalition meeting. And it really all just starts with the agenda. And I mean, so what you just articulated, it's a quote meeting agenda, but it's a communication tool. It's a conversation starter. It's a culture builder as well. It's keeping everybody on the same page. It's that North Star, that guiding compass for all the things you do.
Yep.
But it's just a meeting agenda.
Right. Right.
Yeah. I wanted to really extract that because I see it often gets overlooked and underutilized, not just in coalitions, just meetings altogether. You get an email, here's a meeting agenda, and it's 4 bullet points, and that's it.
Right.
Okay. That doesn't really help me or give me much. Yeah. I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
Yes. So much so that I don't even remember what I was going to ask next because it's wonderful.
Right.
But I do like, though, starting with the science of the positive framework. And what I was hearing is like really using that to uncover who the coalition wants to be, like your identity, almost your big why behind all the different things that you can and will do
Mm-hmm.
rather than letting a grant or funding stream define your identity.
Mm-hmm.
It's more of, we are a coalition. Here's what we believe in and why we believe in it. And so now let's find programs, interventions, services, funding that supports that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and I also feel like part of my job as a coalition coordinator is sometimes to think about how do I take what the community is doing and translate it into their language. So it's like if we're a round peg and they have a square hole, like how to make that fit. Because I think there are often buzzwords or there are things that come and go with funding. And I think sometimes it's like, oh yeah, they would support what we're doing if they understood it in the way that they sort of organize their thoughts or understand things. And so I think sometimes it's also about thinking about how do we crosswalk our own, what we're doing with what the funder is asking for, because fundamentally it's probably the same, but it doesn't always look that way on the surface. So I feel like that's also part of the role of the coordinator too, is to understand that language and to figure out how to crosswalk that.
To be a translator, an interpreter,
a
connector.
Yep.
Yeah. I actually just sent an email this morning to a local coalition for veteran suicide prevention, and they're asking for ideas for year 2 implementation. And guess what? I suggested PCN, but knowing most of the folks have no clue what that is,
right?
I provided a little context and some examples as it relates to each of the main pillars of the fund. Is like, we're already doing PCN adjacent work. It's just some simple changing the messaging to really support it. Yeah. So I get it. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're going to encourage folks to start with the framework, the science of the positive, and let that be sort of their guiding light, their North Star. But say they're in year 3, year 4 of implementation, and they hear this episode and like, oh,
I want to learn more about that. Yeah.
I do need a framework, because I feel like it's very scattered, or I'm here, I'm over here. And like there's got to be a better way. And oh my gosh, Steph just said there is a better way. What do I do now?
Yeah. It's funny. So when I first started working with Science of the Positive as a framework years ago, and, I had the opportunity to be introduced to Dr. Lincoln Bach and be thinking about this stuff, I think we were doing fundamentally like a lot of this kind of work anyway, and we didn't have a name for it. And so it was feeling a little bit like scattered and all over the place. And it was kind of like, I don't know what this is called, but it's working. And we were like, the relationships are super important and building trust. And we said yes to a lot of things because we were like, intuitively, we know this is going to come back to us, and helping people see the work and being data driven, just sort of all of those pieces. But it also still felt a little bit like it was like here and here and here, like it was kind of all over the place. Or it would be like you threw a bunch of seeds into the field and you were like, some of the wildflowers are going to grow. And, I hope, and I'm not really sure. And so then we were able to learn about the Science of the Positive framework. And it was like, oh, this is kind of what we've been doing all along. We didn't really have a name for it. We weren't really, we were sort of being intentional, but not really, so now we can sort of lean into some science around like, okay, there's a way to help organize what we are already doing. Like that fits, that is who we are, like in a lot. So I think for most of our coalition folks, when we started doing the work and doing the training and teaching people about it, it was like, okay, like there it is, like that makes sense. I think if we had taken like a big U-turn and we were like, now we're going to take this framework that, it has nothing to do with what we were doing before, that would have been different, but I think intuitively for our community, it was like, this is kind of what we've been searching for. And it's a shift for a lot of folks to be thinking about, and like, do we really believe like the positive exists and it's worth growing like that? I feel like that's the work we do all the time, and to try to have those conversations with people. But yeah, I think for us, like we were in partway through like one of our drug-free community grants before we sort of officially said, okay, this is the framework, we were doing SPIT, the strategic prevention framework, because everybody has to do that. And, but, and I think when the original drug-free community grant was written way back, we weren't naming Science of the Positive as a framework that we were using, because we didn't really know that that's what we were doing. We were sort of familiar with pieces of the work, but thinking of it as an overarching framework was still new, but it has really been, now it's like, when we talk to people about who we are as a coalition, like I always tell people that out of the gate, like we work from this framework, and it's really important because, what that means is not only who we are, but it's who we aren't. Like we aren't deficit focused. We aren't going to use fear-based prevention strategies. Like those are not, and I can give you the science for why that's true, but like, it's not part of who we are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It comes back to that identity of the coalition and the culture of the coalition. Yeah, absolutely. And it's a soapbox, a rant that I can easily go on, but I want to hear sort of your thoughts on, how you've seen integrating the science of the positive framework into your coalition work and the impacts that has had on the culture and the relationships.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, for me, the relationships are everything. Like there is no coalition, there's no prevention work without relationships. Like it's so much of the work. And I think, so one, for me, science of the positive also like gives space and credit to that piece of the work, which is so huge and foundational. And so I think, even in the strategic prevention framework where we talk about capacity building, but I think, which is where the relationships sort of live, but we don't, I feel like it doesn't get the same attention and focus. Like this work really is about who we are and what's important to us. And, if we really want to think about meaning, I think that comes out of the relationships and the people, in our communities and what's important to them. So I think that's really, really important. And I think if we work that model and we really think about like when I walk into conversations with folks to think about fundamentally like, okay, what there is positive here, even if it's going to be a hard conversation, like what are the possibilities, what could come out of this, and sort of having the idea that, like I like to think about like there's often an open window, like sometimes things, like I think a good example in our work is for years we were cruising along and we were doing really great data collection in our schools, and then we had a shift in our administration, and I had an administrator who suddenly was like, "No, we can't do surveys," and so we sort of we had this like hard stop around surveying, which was not at all like. No one ever had imagined that could be possible. We were like the poster children for like data collection in our state. And so we had to think about like, okay, so we have a no here. What is possible right now? Like we can't just stop what we're doing. So like what is possible and what seeds can we plant for the future? And, and people and things change. And then we had new leadership again, and we were able to survey again. But in part because of all of the strong relationships, and, it was like that one door closed, but all these other windows were still open because we had all of these other really strong relationships and people who understood and cared about that data and knew what it meant to them and knew how it helped them in their work. And, it's like, how do we continue to cultivate those things? And how do we think about just getting that information in a different way? Like now we have to be creative. And so just, oh, well, that was easy. We were able to do that before with no problem, to be thinking about that. But it all came down to like, what relationship capital do we have? And, what trust do we have, and how do we talk about the things that are important and valuable to us that maybe we weren't talking about before because we were taking it for granted?
Mm-hmm. How do you see spirit and that's leading, guiding, influencing the relationship building and relationship nurturing?
Yeah, I always try to think about like spirit first. So like I wouldn't walk into a conversation with anybody and just be like, here's what I need. I always try to think about like, what is my authentic relationship to any of these folks? So, and it's different depending on the people, in that it's not transactional. It's, like we really do care about each other. We know about bits and pieces about each other's lives, that it's, and I think people do things and work hard when they care about the work and when they care about the people that are involved in the work, and it's more fun. And so I think the spirit piece is about the work we do is hard, And I really value the effort and the time that people put in, and I really care about folks as people. And I really think everybody is doing the best that they can with what they have. And so I think investing in that space, and, and sometimes people need to talk about something else for a little while, like, 'cause that's what's really important, or maybe we can help each other with some other piece before we can say, okay, now, like, let's circle back to, whatever it was that we had asked for this meeting for in the first place. But I think people give each other a lot more grace. They're willing to try out new things. Like, I feel like when we were introducing Science of the Positive to folks, for some people where it really felt like it was a shift, they were like, I don't know yet about this, but I trust you because we have an existing relationship. So I'm willing to go there. Like, I'm willing to try, like, and experiment and see how that feels. And so I think it's huge. I think without the trust, it would be impossible for us to do what we do, but it has to be authentic. It can't just be like, okay, because I'm a coalition coordinator, I have to talk to people, and, like, I have to really care about them. And
I'm going to come back to the trust piece, because that's one that we're going to come back to trust. But before we get there, when keeping, spirit first in mind, that also kind of makes me think, like, somebody's like, why they do what they do. Those in my mind are just the same, one of the same, attached. And as I think about my time on the campus and community coalition when I was a police officer, and I was expected to be a part of it because of my job title. Great. That makes sense. Yeah. Logic. I get it. I'm the crime prevention police officer. Duh. But what folks didn't ever connect the dots, didn't take time to really honor or value, was that my personal why for wanting to be involved was my own lived experience with addiction and mental health. And so, like, I like to use that story to remind folks that just because somebody's job title says they should be on the coalition or do this kind of work for the coalition, maybe they have a personal why that means they might want to do a different kind of role or work within the coalition, and not to put people in boxes or labels just based upon their job title. Like, do you have like a similar story or experience or thoughts on that?
Actually, I'm thinking almost the reverse of your story, which is that I have a person who is really valuable in our coalition, who came to us because she's a person in recovery, and wanted to think about giving back, and has found, like, other ways to think about solidifying that experience. Now she does some community outreach for me and stuff, and she's doing some development of materials and some other pieces that I think are skill sets that she is developing or didn't even know she had, and that are also connected to, like, her bigger why around, like, wanting to contribute and give back to the community in lots of different ways. And also because she's a mom and she wants to be a good role model to her daughter. And so, like, there are some of these other issues. Like, she came to us originally because it was like, okay, it's substance abuse prevention. I have some lived experience with that. I can contribute that. But she has, and that's been invaluable. And she's contributing, I think, all these other pieces that she hadn't thought about would be possible originally. Like, it was kind of like, I have this personal knowledge and expertise, but it's like, and you have all these other skills that we're also going to pull in, and that, have been, I think, just, expanding her why in some ways.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. And I just pulled up, so I have some notes that I'd put together for one of the talks I gave in Vienna on the overlap between recovery and prevention.
Yeah.
I had to drop these your way and see if they resonate with her, because it's about identity and purpose. Who you are shapes your choices. Prevention, we help folks build that strong sense of self before. Recovery, it's about redefining their identity. Then the second one is emotional regulation and mental strength. So prevention, we try to teach healthy coping. And then in recovery, we try to build healthy ways to manage triggers. Then that growth, continuous improvement mindset, relationships, support networks, personal responsibility, and integrity. Like, those are all things that we try to support and nurture in prevention.
Yeah.
And we also try to build and teach in recovery. And Yeah. So
Yeah.
as a fellow prevention parent with lived experience,
Yeah.
I suspect that those might jive with her as well and help
Mhm.
even more so connect the dots between, their lived experience and the prevention coalition work.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a dad in our coalition also who's a person with lived experience. And he's, I think similarly, he works in the field of treatment and recovery. So his job, right, is also in the field. But I think he sort of came to the coalition as a community member and as a dad and as thinking about like his boys and what does this mean? And also like, what can he learn about himself and contribute in different ways than he's contributing in his other job, which is really super important, at one end of that, continuum of care too. So yeah.
Okay. That's a little sidebar tangent.
Yeah. It's cool though.
But
yeah.
Yeah. I want to come back to relationships and trust.
Mm.
One of the little things I like to share is, I tell folks, like you said, relationships are the heart of prevention. That's how prevention happens, is through relationships. But I like to tell folks to think one level deeper. When you go out to engage community members, stakeholders, you want to build relationships with them. But I encourage, like, what if you think about, instead of just building a relationship, just ask yourself, how can I build trust with that person? Because at the heart of every relationship, the foundation is built on trust.
Yep.
What say you?
Yeah. So I think about accountability. Like I think one of the biggest ways to build trust is if you said you're going to do something, to do it or to follow through or communicate about like, if there's a delay, if you can't, whatever is going on. And to be honest, like sometimes people forget things or they make mistakes. And so I also feel like, it's one of the core principles to a science of the positive is around being perfected. It's one of my favorite ones. And I think, life gives us lots of chances to be perfected. And I think people appreciate it's like, oh my God, I totally forgot to do that. I had, it was in my inbox. I saw it. I had 100 other things. I'm so sorry. And let me figure out how to do that. Is also invaluable. So, the idea is to not have that happen, to be on top of it. But, in the instances where it does, and sometimes these things happen, to just own it and to say like, oh, I'm really sorry. And let me rectify that and make it right and apologize and then like let's move forward. So I think those are, it's trying to be there as much as possible and to be responsive and to close the loop and to get back to people when you say you're going to be and to be there when you say you're going to be. And I also think it's also connected to this idea of like, I really try to think about how can I say yes to stuff in the community? Like if folks are asking for help with something, to really think about how is this connected to what I do? How do I name that for folks? And I'm sort of fortunate I have the ability to think about prevention a little bit holistically because in addition to the grants that we work under, which can be sometimes very specific, some of my funding comes directly from the town where I work. And so that allows me to really be thinking, I think, a little more expansively about health and wellness and what some of this work means and gives me a little bit of flexibility around like, I can say yes to this thing because I can see the potential. Like, one would not just, with the relationship, like, okay, this is, I'm going to do this with the why, for example, and I'm going to tie it to what I do day to day. But also I know that some of those relationships are going to really pay off because they are an incredible community partner and they see things that we need to be sharing and talking about, and they have space and they have trust in the community and they have credibility. And so like all of those pieces, I think, so it's like, how do we take the trust and the stuff we build with individual people and grow that out also so that it becomes expansive and supports all of the work. But I think being there and showing, like being true to your word is important.
So I heard being true to your word, listening, being accessible and having that air of like servant leadership, like saying yes, how can I help? Always happy to help.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. And I always often like, I try to have at the beginning of the year, like I'll meet with some of our key leaders in the community, like our school principals and the superintendent and, some of the folks that I have regular connections with, the police department, and, start out that conversation by, hey, let's talk about what's been going on. How do you see my role or the coalition's role? Like, how can we help? Like, how can we support what are you doing? What are you noticing? And that we can do some sort of generative stuff like, oh, well, let's think about like what might be possible. I might not be able to say yes to all those things, but let's sort of do that line of inquiry around, okay, well, here are some resources and ideas that we have. And maybe if we put some stuff together, or you guys have these folks, or like, what if we did this, or is that possible? And so I think those are also important ways to also, be building that foundation and trust with people.
Yes. And like what that looked like for me as a college cop was, I called it making the rounds.
Yeah.
And I just go out on foot patrol and go to like the student affairs assessment, the health education resource center. And really, that was my first quote, prevention adjacent job. So I didn't have this strategy. It was just natural, but I would approach it with just, wanting to see what life was like through their eyes.
Yeah.
What was the work that they were doing? What was working? What were the challenges? And just in my mind, I was just trying to get to know them beyond small talk.
Yep.
But what I quickly realized was through that, I was just like you were saying, I was able to connect the dots like, oh, well, wait, I could do this to help with that. Or, we could combine forces here. And the opportunities just naturally presented themselves when I didn't come with an ask, hey, can you do this for me? But looking at life through their eyes and seeing where their challenges and their successes were. And it was it's now that I know prevention, it's so fun to reflect back and see how it just started to naturally happen.
Yeah. I mean, I think about the coordinator role too, as like it's like a catalyst or a connector. So I feel like sometimes because I have the privilege of being in different kinds of spaces and working with different folks and having those relationships, that sometimes I also, like you had said, it's like you start to see connections. And so it's like, oh, it might not be something that I need to be involved with, but hey, I noticed like the Y is really concerned about this particular thing and the police department is too. And have you guys talked to each other? And like, can I help facilitate that conversation? Or, the health department and the school, are both talking about this. Have you guys had a conversation with each other? Or I'm aware that these things are happening. So sometimes like by keeping your ears open and listening to, you're in a role to help people, even if it's not you, it's like by just putting two people together that didn't realize they were working on the same thing.
It could be something as simple as an introduction email.
Yeah.
Hey, you two need to talk. Make it happen.
Right. Or the next time we're all together at this coalition meeting, I want to make sure I introduce you to this person and to say like, hey, I know you guys are both really interested in this. Have you thought about collaborating together around that issue?
Yeah. And you said facilitating. And so I want to try to tease something out and just, I don't know what to expect. So here we go. I know you and Ben do some work around transformational leadership. Seeing you all present on it. I love it. One of the concepts that I started talking about last year was bringing the idea of facilitative leadership to sort of the coalition coordinator role. And I'll share sort of my thinking behind that is that younger coalition coordinators might be intimidated by the thought of, I have to be a leader. There's the mayor, the police chief, these important people 20 years older than me, and I'm supposed to be their leader. It can be kind of intimidating. And then I also see a lot of times all of the work falls on the coalition coordinator. They don't get that buy-in. They don't delegate. And part of that might be because they're new, they're learning leadership. And so my thought was reframing the language to facilitative leadership. If they come into it as a facilitator to bring the process, to create the space, to be the guide, but the group, the coalition is the one that brings the wisdom. It's like you're facilitating a workshop or facilitating the conversations that almost that neutral third party, but not in this sense neutral, but really focusing on bringing that good, robust process, i.e. framework, meeting agendas, those kinds of things might relieve some of that pressure, position them sort of with a different mindset to make it easier to delegate, to build that buy-in, to hand off tasks. Still incorporating elements of transformational leadership when they're ready. Thoughts on that? Because you are a coalition coordinator.
So I mean, the power stuff is really interesting. And I think I know a lot of new young coalition coordinators in the field. In Massachusetts, it seems like there are lots of folks coming into the field with tons of energy and excitement. And yeah, probably some of that, like, how do I hang with some of these folks that are in these titled, really big positions? And so I always say, I think about like, there's different kinds of power. So there's like power that comes with a title and the folks you supervise and the resources you get to control, right? Or maintain. I think some of what helps with that, at least for me, is like, I really try to build relationships with some of those folks. So it's like, yeah, that's the chief. And that comes with a level of respect and honor. I know how to, like, we have a true relationship and I can ask for things and I could apologize and I can send a text, and say like, hey, can you help me with this? The same with like the superintendent of schools, or, it's like really trying to work on building those things. They aren't humans, who also have to get up and, that's their job and they've earned that. But they also are involved with the work that you do because hopefully it's also important to them. I think particularly working in the public sector, like most of the folks that I work with, they're not in it for the money anyway. At the end of the day, it's like they're doing it because they care about the community and the people. But I think creating that space, it's sort of an interesting tension around, because folks, I think the thing about delegating that's really hard, I know it's really hard for me, is people are like, well, you get paid to do this and to think about this all the time. So, sometimes it's hard to delegate some of those coalition things. And like, we've had moments in our coalition where I've had to say, listen, like, I'm one person. I would love to go to everything. We have to decide as a group, like, what are our priorities? And I can help get materials and information, but I can't be at 3 places on a Saturday. Like, or sometimes I can't even be at one place on a Saturday because I also have a family. And I'm happy to support that event, but like, people need to step up. And if we don't want to, that's our choice as an organization. Like, maybe we don't have the bandwidth right now or whatever, but like, we have to own that decision, And so, or we have to prioritize how we put our time or how you want me to spend my time. Like, as a coalition coordinator, like, if you want me to go to those things, I can, but I also have limited hours in the week. And so it's like, is that worth, and maybe it is, like, that particular event where I can be somewhere and meet new people and build those relationships might be well worth not being in the office Friday morning or something, is a trade-off. But I think as a group also, we have to somehow think about, and it's part of my job to also make that kind of clear to folks. Like, I don't have an infinite, none of us do, like an infinite well of hours or time or to do the things, even if we love them. And so I think that's part of it. But also, the more people are bought into the process and the work, I think, and giving people really concrete, specific, like, hey, who can help me with this? Or I know this is a talent that you have. So we do this together. That, like, those are some of the ways. And I think you're leveraging your relationships to do that. People want to do things for each other because they trust and they like you and and the work is important. And, and I've watched in places where people are like, yeah, that's important to me, but I don't like that person. So I'm not going to do it. Like, I don't want to spend my time that way, or I don't trust that they're going to hold up their end of the bargain. And so I think it's all so interconnected, which again is why I think that relationship piece is worth, and it's so important to do that work, because it's just, without it, the stuff falls apart.
It just doesn't happen. Yeah. Like, I facilitated a strategic, this cold is talking, a strategic planning session for a countywide coalition. And we did it over multiple sessions because, they can't get together for a full 6-hour day. So we did it 1.5-hour sessions. And I used, participatory methods. Mm-hmm. So flip charts, sticky walls, their voices, everybody's involved. And we got down to, they had identified their key focus areas, and we were organized into like our task teams or subcommittees. And did the old, put your name on a Post-it and put it up where you want to go. And then we just step back and look, and there's one of the key focus areas that doesn't have anybody. Mm-hmm. And so the conversation was, well, up until this point, we as a coalition agreed that is an important area. We need to focus on that. But, based upon where the energy's at in the room here, do we still feel that? Right. And so then folks kind of made them like really think about it. And a couple folks like, Yeah, I'll help support that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, 'cause they as a group said it was important, but
Right.
yet nobody signed up for it. And so, but when it was on the wall in front of them, they created it themselves.
Mhm.
The process is what held them accountable, and
Right.
the process called them out, not necessarily me.
Yeah. 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 No, I think
But
that's,
yeah,
and I think that's an
yeah.
important piece that a lot of times people don't always learn. And that's a fine line too, as a facilitator.
Mhm.
Like I've been in those
Yeah.
situations where I'm like, I can be totally neutral and I'm going to come in,
Yeah.
I'm going to facilitate a process
Yep.
and
Yep.
I don't have to own what happens at the end. Or it doesn't matter to me. In the coalition coordinator role, it feels different because it's like, well, it's also my community and I am really invested. And so I'm not really a neutral party. And also I'm the person whose stuff might get delegated to by the team. Like, okay, we really want to focus on this. So it's kind of a funny, like trying to wear those two hats, or like if we're trying to facilitate this process. But yeah, I think the process stuff can be so helpful. Like I facilitated a group years ago where they were supposed to narrow down some health topics and they were supposed to prioritize. And as we were going through the process, what I saw happening and had to call out to them was like, so you guys just keep combining everything into like one. So it's like all of a sudden where we had topics before, now it's like health. And I'm like, we have limited fun. Like you can't keep smushing everything together. I appreciate that. Like nobody wants to let stuff go, but like we're not actually really moving the process by just being like, well, actually, these two things kind of could be the same. Are they?
One of the facilitation methods I brought into strategic planning it's a liberating structure called TRIZ, making space. Are you familiar with it?
I'm familiar with some of the liberating structures, and I've used some of them before. I feel like I know that name, but if you describe the method, I might remember. Yeah.
So we'd create our vision. What do we want to see in the next 3 to 5 years? And then instead of going right into like, okay, what are we going to do to get there? We would try to identify what are the contradictions, what's getting in the way. If we're saying this is what we want, what's blocking us? And so then we would plan our strategies around removing those blocks and barriers. But a fun twist was to use TRIZ in that it's about stopping doing things. And so the first round is, what actions would we take if we wanted to have, to stop this, have the worst outcomes possible? And it's kind of a fun little take on it. Like, oh my gosh, put bumper stickers out and say prevention sucks or whatever,
Right.
out there.
Worst possible idea. Yeah.
Right. The worst ideas and get the worst results. Then it's okay. Well, now let's look at what we're doing. Is there anything we're currently doing that in any way kind of resembles those things? And then the third step is okay, what are we going to stop doing? Let's not add something, but let's stop doing something to make space for then being able to add and do something. So that's kind of a fun
cool.
little twist, but it forced them the process forced them to let go of things.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it was
I love that. And I like the ones where it's like trying to see where the energy is in the room, or like we'll use sticky dots and stuff. And like you were saying, it's like, okay, you all said this was important, but nobody put a dot over there. So let's talk about that. Are we willing to let that go? Or do we have to think about what does that mean?
Yeah. And like we'll do a 90-day implementation calendar. And then it's okay, let's step back and look at where we plotted all of the work.
Yeah. Yeah.
Does it look balanced?
Realistic?
Right? Is it feasible? Like, why is the first 4 weeks just jam-packed and then nothing? Or
right.
Yeah,
or why did we schedule everything around the holidays in December? Like we all know that's going to be problematic when we get there.
Right. Yeah. So the little processes can make a big difference, and but like they really, really can. And yeah, I know we weren't really going to talk about that when we were planning, but hey, that's where we went.
Yeah. Well, I think, and that's part of that intentional like meeting piece too, is like, do I have some of these things in my pocket to help people sort of illuminate or help them to see something about themselves that would be hard maybe to see otherwise, but the process sometimes put that stuff out there and people are like, oh, whoa, I didn't think about that. But now that I'm seeing like none of us put our names on the board, like what is that about?
Right. And listeners, I'll put a couple links in the show notes to the Liberating Structures website. It's very, very resourceful. There's a menu, step-by-step instructions for how to facilitate it. And then also
There's a book. I have the book on my bookshelf.
Yes, there's a book, and then there's the book, The Art of the Focused Conversation, great facilitation book. And I also would recommend the Technology of Participation, their TFM, TSP, and then I did their year-long mastery facilitation program.
Oh, cool.
Great,
yeah.
great stuff.
I got trained in that years ago with we had the sticky wall that it always would end up in somebody's drawer, like in a big ball, like stuck to itself.
Oh, yeah. There's a method to folding those up.
I believe there is. And we had the spray. So it's like you could sort of try to reinvigorate the wall. I thought that was cool. I was like, oh, it's like the inverse of a sticky note, the giant sticky wall thing.
Low tech is the new tech.
Yeah, I really like that. I was trained in facilitative leadership through the what is the name of the organization? It's going to bother me because we should give them credit. They're in Cambridge and they have a site in Ireland. Interaction Institute for Social Change. And so they teach a lot of facilitative techniques for meetings and meeting management and really thinking about, one of the things I actually really love is they talk about how do you balance process, product, and relationships in a meeting, like the sort of triangle of all of the pieces, but lots of overlap with the technology of participation stuff.
Yeah.
Just different tools. Yeah. I mean, we, in our house, too, my husband is an archaeologist, which seemingly would have like nothing to do with all of this stuff. And he's a huge science of the positive geek, has been tapped a lot with Dr. Lincoln Bach too, about like, there's sort of how the framework is so applicable in all these different walks of life. And he's been really applying and thinking about like spirit, science, action, return in archaeology for a long time. And it's really been serving him. And so, really just trying to think about how these pieces show up, or like in parenting, how am I thinking about like spirit first? And lots of places will use different language for that. It's like connect before you correct, or love and limits, or, it's like all of some of the parenting pieces that come out of some of these other evidence-based pieces are all connected, and positive childhood experiences and how that is a big part of science of positive. So, but I love sort of seeing all of those connections and thinking about how they go together. And I have a colleague in the public schools who is really, I've been able to like really sort of talk to her about all of this stuff. And she's just like lit up with like starting to also see the connections. And it's like, oh, in education, we call it this, or like, here is, what does this mean? We think about teachers and morale and like who they are to be able to show up for their students and mindset. And like, it's like all of these things where I'm like, yep. And that science of the positive. And like, these, if we look at it in a particular way, right, it can fall into that framework, and it's part of the work that we do, because all of these systems are interconnected. So it's like the frameworks can be interconnected. The systems in which we all live are interconnected. And so, how does that impact, like for me, like my primary focus is adolescents. Like, how does that affect our kids and the environment they're in and the context they're in to make healthy choices or not, all related to all of us and everything that we all do.
Yes, and my mind just went somewhere.
That's what's fun about prevention.
Like, yeah, I'm still trying to like figure out, where did my mind just go? What am I thinking? So I've been listening to the Telepathy Tapes podcast. Really fascinating, really interesting. And where I'm at in their series right now, they're talking about the idea that consciousness, it's a shared consciousness, that it's not the higher level, it's the core of what holds us all together is our consciousness.
Like Jungian, like sort of that like, collectivism.
Yes.
Which I know is where actually a lot of the science of the positive stuff, like I know Dr. Lincoln Bach is really sort of steeped in some of that Jungian research.
Yeah.
Just interesting. Yeah.
So then I started down this rabbit hole of, is science of the positive what that core, that common thread that holds all of our work together, all of the work that's being done, that foundation. Yeah.
It is for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
I would love to believe that that's true. Like,
yeah, there's a mountaintop campfire. Let's do some deep thinking conversation for this summer.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. That is really, really interesting. And like, what would it mean? What would it mean?
Right. What would it mean to say, and be able to articulate this is the shared foundation.
It would be neat.
Talk about a legacy for Jeff. Oh.
I know, right? Yeah. Well, I think it would certainly be true of all the people who come to, those trainings in Summer Institute.
Right.
That they share that piece. But I think it's big. I think it's a lot bigger.
Okay. So homework for you and I.
Yep.
Have some talking points to present this or pitch this to start up a deep conversation during the team dinner in June.
That would be neat. Yeah. Yeah.
Ding, ding, tapping the glass. Steph and I have something to share, and everyone's like, what the hell's about to happen here? Imagine a world where.
I know. That would be cool. That would be a really neat thing to do. One of those
Yeah. Okay. So this is recorded. I'm going to edit the recording, so I'll see what I can noodle up.
Okay.
But before we wrap up, I just want to open space. You have a global audience of prevention professionals, range from community coalition members to state level leaders and even some international prevention organization leaders listening right now. What would you want to tell them?
I mean, I think that we all have a responsibility to talk about the value of prevention and why it's so important and sort of what it means in terms of the value of people. And, when I think about prevention, particularly with adolescents, I think a lot about brain health, right? We are trying to grow healthy, strong, vibrant brains. And what could be more important than that, and so it's my lane in that is really around not introducing substances into the adolescent brain, and sort of delaying that as long as possible to sort of maximize health. But it's really important. And I think sometimes we forget, because prevention is essentially when it works well, it's invisible. We're doing our job. It kind of feels like nothing is happening. And it's funny, I've been talking a lot about mindset and positivity and stuff with folks and sort of how the science of the positive framework and what does it mean to be thinking about, having this positive mindset and all of the benefits of that on our brain health and how we're able to work with each other in inquiry. And I think that, there's this idea that if nothing happened, I know Dr. Lincolnbach uses a slide, and I've actually seen it in real life in fields where it's on this site in 1842, nothing happened, or I think about my kid comes home from school and she's nothing happened today. And I think that's probably a pretty good day in the life of a middle schooler. If nothing happened, or if I got on a plane and arrived at my destination and I was well, nothing happened on the flight. It's no, a million really positive, important things happened, right? And on this site where nothing happened, things were growing and things were blooming and people were living their lives and coming in and out of the space. And maybe that nothing tragic happened. That doesn't mean nothing happened. And so I think also just sort of reframing and reclaiming, if in prevention, if the goal is nothing happened, that is really invisible. But if we think about, well, we're growing health and we are and I think that also goes back to science of the positive. How do we measure that? How do we notice that's happening? How do we name it? So it doesn't become invisible, because then it's easy to think we don't need it. And I think the absence of it is a huge loss, but the, sort of demonstrating it or showing it or making it more transparent can be challenging. And I think all of us have some responsibility to think about how we can do that more and help our partners to do that and to celebrate that and recognize it for how important it is. So that's my little soapbox.
Amen. Underline, highlight, bold font. Beautiful, beautiful. And with that last little bit of wisdom, I will just say thank you for spending time with me today and sharing your wisdom, your experience with the world. Keep on rocking. Yeah. I'll see you in Big Sky, and listeners, hope to see you all there too.
Thank you for listening to the Prevention Leaders Podcast with Dave Clausen. Since prevention is better together, make sure you click the subscribe button and share this and other episodes with a friend. If you have a topic idea or guest suggestion, follow us on social media or email us at info@preventionleaders.com.